Is Joe gonna go? I feel like he was the one who went to the World Cups when he was vice president. Yeah. Sorry. Right.
Yeah.
He definitely was at past World Cups. Like,
it was probably fucking
envoy.
Doug. Oh, I realized recently. Doug really, because I was talking. Well, I sat down at this dinner and I was waiting really long for this food. It's a long story, but I was like, I just announced we did it, Joe, when we finally got this food. And this guy who just got off work, down the counter, just started laughing. He's like, sorry, where is Kamala Harris? Like, where the fuck is she? Where is she? And I was like, great question. And it made me realize what a character Doug was in our universe starting out. But as a result of her disappearing, Doug also disappeared. And it's really made me sad. So maybe Doug better fucking show up in the luxury box.
Doug is going to be there with Jim Toth, with Padma Lakshmi, with Reggie Bush, with all the previous World Cup with U.S. box attendees.
Pat Benjamin.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He's in the mix for sure.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm really looking forward to Doug kicking off the World Cup. Yeah. He better be the emissary. That is obviously every day I think about what I would do if I were Doug, because as we've established, this is the pinnacle. This is the dream job. Second husband, just laying around playing FM in the Naval Observatory all day, ordering pizza. And I would be like, come on, Brandon, I am definitely going to be the U.S. emissary to the World Cup. Clearly, I've been working so hard for this. Look at my FM save. I've earned this, basically. So I believe in you, Doug. I assume you'll be there.
Is second husband the closest role to a prince that we would have?
Prince.
Yeah, or maybe Grand Duke, not Grand Duke, just Duke.
Doug, Prince of San Bernardino County.
Well, what a way to start our off-season episode, our first off-season episode, invoking the warm memory of Doug. It's episode 231 of View from 202, coming to you in November. It's been a month, a couple weeks since we last recorded. The dust has settled on the season a bit, and I kind of like it that way, because I think it was good to take a breath on Red Bull's world a bit. And we're on the eve of the World Cup today, actually. So, I don't know, maybe you'll be listening to this tomorrow when the World Cup is playing. The absolutely stonking match of Ecuador and Qatar. So, I know, everyone's going to be riveted to their TVs for that one. Going to be real exciting football. I think, as Sass was telling us, Ecuador's matches for the last 3 years have been 0-0 draws. So I think that's perfect, actually. It's going to be good.
That's the best World Cups are the ones where every game is 0-0 and big teams end up on the shit end of it.
Right.
I was going to say, that's the old Italian idiom. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
That was one of the weird things about the 2010 World Cup, is that the first match of that game was actually kind of hype. It was the South Africa, 2-0 over, or is it 2-1? I don't know, over Mexico. And then that was all the goals that were scored for the week. That was it. So
we wanted to root for, I think, the 0-0 for an exciting World Cup.
I think that'll be more auspicious.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's the eve of the World Cup. The MLS season is done and dusted. Playoffs are completed. Some roster stuff has started. Expansion draft has happened. The team has done a couple press conferences, done a couple contract moves. We've gone through the protected list, expansion draft, all that sort of stuff, and we are here to cover it all for you, hopefully in a little bit more than an hour. So I think, first things first, I guess. There are other teams in the league somehow.
There's an entire other conference.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to derail, but when you said First Things First, I just thought of that Iggy Azalea song. I'm sorry, I don't know why.
Wow, that's a throwback.
Yeah,
A weird throwback.
That's we were
you're
just
the
talking.
realist, Brit. That's
We were
the First
just
Things
talking
First.
about, I guess, the Obama era. Maybe we
You invoked,
incepted
yeah.
you, with that, and how Joe. I don't know if this is going to make it to the Cold Open Cup, but Joe Brandon himself was the emissary to the World Cup for that. So there we go. I'm sorry for incepting you.
So Iggy Azalea is making the World Cup song this year.
For Australia.
Yeah, exactly.
Because they're going to be there. The rest of the playoffs shook out. The Eastern Conference final was not fun. Not a good case for us. Philadelphia versus NYCFC. Because I think we were the only home team to lose in that first round.
Yes.
So clearly the least worst option obviously happened, where Philly actually did pull through this time, as opposed to last year when they were hobbled by COVID. So then we had the Philadelphia Union playing in a final against LAFC, which, I forgot about LAFC. LAFC also won the Shield at the end. Lovely that they pulled that out. Philly actually choked that pretty bad,
Yeah.
right?
Right, but it was also just generally, there was a lot of buzz about how it was one of the rare moments of recent times where the actual two best teams in the league went to the
Yeah.
final.
Yeah, it kind of worked out nicely.
Right.
I enjoyed that.
Right.
I think somebody said it was the first 1-versus-1 since like at least the early 2010s. But now I'm thinking about those MLS Cups in the early 2010s. There's no way those were like those Dynamo ones were not number
Top
one seed.
seed.
Colorado was not top seed. 2013.
Galaxy might have been I think it might have been Galaxy, one of them. I can't remember who the last team to win the double with Shield was.
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, it was Toronto, but
Yeah.
yeah.
It's been a long
before
time
that.
since it was 1-versus-1.
Right.
Although I guess even with those Toronto Seattle Cups, Seattle's kind of just like the big dog out west, where it still kind of felt like.
Yeah.
Yeah,
a
even when they had bad seasons and made a run, they're still the big team out west.
Yeah.
Right. And somehow everyone survived despite the fact that there was no dedicated parking, which, honestly, I think the game should have been fucking canceled. Everyone should have been given a free car as an apology.
Exactly.
Yeah, everyone should have been given, 2 free cars and a year's worth of parking.
And they should be able to drive both simultaneously for a single passenger.
Yeah, ghostwriting, both of them. Yeah, exactly. So somehow the game still happened, and it was. Did you guys catch the game? I caught the end of it.
We were all playing for most of it.
Caught the tail end of it.
I caught like the last 10 minutes of extra time.
I caught the Gareth Bale goal, basically.
Right.
I turned it on literally when Philly went up. And
Yeah.
during the celebration, and I was like, fuck.
Yeah.
And when our new striker broke the LA keeper's leg.
I missed that. See,
didn't see that part.
I didn't get into that. Was it nasty?
It was kind of
It
nasty.
was the same play that he got
cut
the red
away.
card, right? Or was it the same play that he got the red card, the keeper? I mean, obviously,
I
he
can't
couldn't have kept
remember,
playing.
but
Yeah. So,
I mainly remember the Theismann replay.
yeah. But the Garrett, I actually have to confess that I turned off because I was like, I don't know, in the middle. I was like on the way to somewhere, so I was watching on my phone. It was not a comfortable time to be watching. So after Philly scored, I was like, wow,
I don't want to watch the celebration.
fuck this.
Yeah.
And then I saw all the posts and I was like, what the fuck? So I missed the Gareth Bale goal in real time.
Yeah.
I
was
do
nuts.
how many headers has he scored in his career? Can't be that many.
I mean, he scores them in big games, though. There was
Yeah.
that Champions League that he won with the header in that one Madrid final.
So, I mean,
That's his only goal, right, for LAFC?
no, I think he
He
scored.
got a couple, but he hasn't. He's like barely started for them.
Okay.
Same with Chiellini. Like,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's the thing. And like, there was a lot of like, maybe this segues into another thing that happened with Red Bulls, but there's a thing about the discussion about the salary cap and Red Bulls being centered in it, of course, and not to like go into another thing, but it was kind of a little bit of a debate in Red Bull's land about like, oh, do we want Philly or LA to win? with the general consensus seeming to be, no, we don't want Philly to win because they're rivals or whatever like that. But also the other edge of that sword is that LA, the quote unquote big spending team, won the Shield and the Cup. But the ironic part of that is that their big stars, Bale and Chiellini, barely played any role in that at all.
Weren't they mid-season acquisitions?
They were
both of
mid-season
them?
acquisitions, and they both barely started at all.
And LAFC was running the table early in the season.
They literally got
without
worse once they brought them on.
Yeah.
There's that other guy, Bouanga, who came from the French league at the same time, who I guess ended up being a bigger part of their team and scored in the final and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, just kind of an ironic thing that like, people do get to say like, oh, LA, look at how it, look at how you can do if you spend big on stars and stuff like that. But then also if you take 5 seconds to scratch under the surface, the stars didn't really help them at all.
I want to talk more about that when we talk about some of the like Mintslav comments.
Yeah.
But I think Philly lost in a very appropriate way. I think especially because of how they knocked us out last year. It was that 120th minute, goal that just devastates them.
Some of the worst penalties I've ever seen too.
Yeah. Oh yeah. God.
It was they were destroyed.
The fact that, and I think the LAFC first penalty was actually the worst penalty I've ever seen. That was like technically on target, and the fact that they came back to still pull through is wild.
Yeah.
But yeah, maybe also when we get to the Mintslav stuff, we can also you had a column kind of along those lines, Cork, about like how Philly's model kind of shows that maybe it's not a systemic limitation, maybe it's just execution, which I think is also apt looking at it the other way, where I think it's part of me doesn't I don't mind at all that Steve Cherundolo I think put together a really strong season and was rewarded for it, because I feel like he's been a consummate pro. I mean, obviously, we will, tactical manager won't remember this because he wasn't born yet, but we will remember when he played soccer for the U.S. men's national team. Fun fact: did you know that Steve Cherundolo played soccer for the U.S. men's national team?
Wow.
And also, he was a coach wasn't he in the Hanover system for like ever? Right after,
exactly. And then he was coaching at Hanover forever, and it seemed like he was like dead set on just doing a career managing in Germany, and then randomly got hired to be LAFC's USL coach with Las Vegas, and they finished last in the league last year.
That's wild. I forgot about that.
Yeah, but then when Bob Bradley left last year, they promoted him to the first team job.
That's a guy who's really studied and earned his stripes, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
So sorry to get on this so early, but his German is almost certainly better than Struber's English. I'm calling it right now. Although maybe it's not fair because he got to learn like the northern dialect instead of the hill people's talk. But if there's any Bavarians listening, why?
So true.
Why? Like, how did you get here?
Sorry, but why?
Yeah.
Bavaria made me feel like I had not learned German for 5 years before I
Same. Yeah, that's crazy. Me too. But yeah, so Steve's a good one.
Good job, Steve.
Good job, Steve.
Steve LAFC.
Glad
Good
that
job, Steve.
Steve Hanover.
Steve Angel.
Congratulations.
He pulled it out. Well done. Well earned. But yeah, glad that's over. And then once the season ended, then all of the contracts and stuff immediately starts. Also, it was great. I just got to get it in. Philadelphia lost 2 championships on the same day.
Yeah.
Very, very good day for me.
Yeah.
So contract stuff started, and we brought most people back. I mean, I think...
the contract announcements were actually not that eventful outside of stuff that was kind of writing on the wall like Long.
Right. And even with Long, I mean, you get the sense that anyone who's on the plane to Qatar, that it was sort of a courtesy that maybe everyone was just sort of, there doesn't seem to be much expectation that people are going to be focusing on that right now. I'm sure they've got stuff going on. Every agent has stuff going on in the behind the scenes, but everyone's kind of focusing on the tournament, understandably, because Aaron Long did in fact make it onto the squad, as well as former Red Bulls players Tim Ream and Aaron Long.
And Tyler
Adams. What I mean. There's been a lot of Tyler Adams media push recently too.
And Academy, Tim Weah, I guess, Brooklyn.
Yeah.
Kyle Duncan, homeboy.
True. but we'll get to that later. So Long, as we all know, I guess he qualifies for the selective limited free agency we have now in the current CBA. Man, the union, they need to like go to like an intensive negotiating seminar with like the MLB union or something like that. I don't know about
the free agents thing is still so. It's actually weird. There's more. Like feels like a more significant amount of players in it in free agency this year, but it's still just like such a weird jerry rigged thing. Yeah.
Free agent.
So
Right.
Aaron Long has become a free agent. We all knew that.
Schneider said in this press conference that they hadn't come to a new contract when they tried to talk during the year, and now that's that's officially out. And I've kind of trolled around to hear that it was a pretty big offer, but that Long is still trying to test the market, and nothing will probably happen until after the World Cup.
Okay. And I think we've commented on this over the season. Along these lines, where Aaron Long, great player for a club, really put in a good shift. I think, but his sort of arrival or coming out in 2018 as a best 11 MLS best 11 player is one of the real shining moments or part of the real shining seasons of this club's history. So very warm feelings. However, there is a sense, I think, that maybe this has run its course.
Yeah.
Especially with the genuinely bad luck. I think like the club was totally within its rights to turn down a bid in 2019 for him. But before
we knew that the season was going to be a dud.
Yeah. Before the
same thing with Kaku.
Before we knew the season was going to be a dud, that season ends, and then COVID fucking wastes a year of everyone's career and then he gets hurt, and then now he's 30 years old, and the market for that is very different, and that's just shit luck really for everyone involved. I can understand why he would be upset by that, but like the club were not the ones that made it so there was no meaningful soccer for like 12 months. So
it kind of feels like when you're at a job for a while and like you've like to no fault of anyone's party, it's like you feel like it's done, and it's done. I kind of feel like that's the case with Aaron Long right now, where it's like, oh, it's kind of time for him to go.
Yeah.
I thought I think part of it too is I'm just not sure what type of like role he has as a leader of a team, and I don't know if that's
he was captain by default,
right?
Yeah,
I just don't know if it's consequence of like what the circumstances like Struber kind of presented with like how we played this season, or if it was something else. But I think he's like a very like thoughtful and through his interviews like well-spoken guy, but I just feel like something about like, I don't know, the leadership qualities that we've admired from previous captains, I just feel like sometimes lacked from him. But again, I don't know how much of that could have maybe been changed under, I think, a better manager with a better sense of like squad consistency,
right,
and other kind of on-field characteristics that like kind of lacked from the top down.
I think it's definitely a bad sign. I mean, this is even without Long, ending up leaving. I mean, we now know that he's turned down a contract offer, and it's not a good sign that two captains in a row have not been bought in and wanted to stick around for whatever project's being built right now.
Yeah.
So.
Right. These are not the leadership qualities I want to see, because I do not trust these people with leading the player mutiny that I wanted for the past couple seasons.
Right. But also it's like that, to that point, it's kind of a new, we've turned over the squad, and I think Long is really one of the only guys other than CCJ and Mara, I guess, kind of still around from that 2018 era, and who've kind of run the gamut of the zone, the Armis zone, and then COVID zone. Just, the worldwide COVID zone that we're all in, where like, I mean, Lord knows we on this podcast have felt the sort of malaise, I feel like, just talking about the team, and then we think we observe it in the team as well. Maybe, maybe it's not the worst idea to just sort of reset and refresh along those lines too. I think Aaron Long might just carry the baggage of the weird kind of trajectory of the last couple seasons on him.
Yeah. And our opinions on the podcast, we might even want to refresh even further, but that does not look like it's in the cards. But
which opinions do you want to refresh?
Well, just that we don't like Gerhard Struber.
Oh, that's a pretty fresh opinion still. That's a newer opinion.
Oh yeah, exactly.
If I was still like obsessed with Chris Armas, then yeah, we should refresh that. But now I've seen the light, and I kind of love Chris Armas for what he is. He
had a better record, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think he's actually like aspirational. Like what he did. It's pretty cool. I mean, yeah. I mean, he had a better time at Manchester United than Cristiano Ronaldo did. True. Look,
when are we getting the Armas Piers Morgan interview?
6 months in Old Trafford. One person handles it like a pro, listens to his ear pods like a pro. One person throws a fucking tantrum on TV with one of the most hated men in the English-speaking world.
What we need is a Chris Cuomo interview with Chris Armas.
Chris Cuomo interview with Mohamed Keita. Yeah. Going under the hood.
That reminds me, I should have opened the episode to say I'm very happy to still be a loyal citizen of the Cathy regime. The brat usurper Zeldin has been defeated and will be banished soon. So if you see the brat usurper Zeldin at RBA, you should, give him a wedgie.
And chant crime back at them.
Or throw a White Claw at him. I did at the Astros World Series parade. That guy threw the White Claw at Ted Cruz. And I don't know if it actually hit him or not, but then the guy's like, being charged with a crime and everything. And his lawyer is now claiming that he was throwing at him because he wanted him to catch it and chug it. And my friend, who's a lawyer now in Houston, loves this. He said this is great because it's going to require Ted Cruz's lawyer to go into court and argue that it was not a reasonable expectation that he would be able to catch a White Claw, that nobody with a sane mind would expect him to do such a athletic feat of catching a White Claw and drink it.
And then chugging it all.
Mm-hmm, yeah. So that's great. So yeah, I think if you want to. Well, I guess I can't I can't encourage that. But if you see the brat usurper Zeldin outside of RBA, I think you can contextually figure out maybe what would be interesting to me. Anyway, what were we talking about?
We were closing up the long conversation. But then, so that's all kind of. I mean, that's all kind of been spelled out for a little bit, and we'll see what happens. But then. And we were also just saying that, it's just, it's not a good sign for the direction of the project that the last two captains have bailed at first opportunity. Yeah. And, I mean, it's just kind of, I guess this can kind of circle back around to my column about Philly being in the final and everything, where it's just like, I mean, despite, LAFC being, the star team that won the tournament and everything, it was still Philly right up behind them. Philly, the second cheapest, youngest team after us. Yeah. And they had no problem fighting for the Shield and going to the final. There's an argument to be made that they're a bit further along in their process under Tanner, but then Tanner only started a year before Thelwell here, and we obviously abandoned the Thelwell project by now and are back at the drawing board. And it's not clear that drawing board is very clean at all at this point if the captains are jumping ship.
And I tell you who isn't hanging out with, the Louis Dreyfus family in stadium side and talking about how great it would be to leave is Jim Curtin.
Yeah.
I was going to say
he was already there, already bought in.
I was going to say that, as corny as like the whole captain's curse thing is, I think it's time we give the armband to Struber himself this season as a sign of intent.
How many different armbands do you think he would wear
during the game?
Yeah.
Just constantly switching them out.
I think another odd factor of it is that, and I actually don't mean this like as critically or as negatively as it could, but like Long is a guy that Struber seemed to unusually want to be friends with. Like, he seemed to actually like him for some reason, or at least want Aaron Long to like him, which, you know,
The Capitano.
if you listen to the podcast, you will know that Struber does not seem to have that attitude with most of the players. So, and then it's compounded by the fact that he was injured all of last year, and then Nealis and Reyes played so well the year he was gone. And then when he came back, it was, you know, Reyes was hurt, so it kind of made it weird. But there's a bit of a weirdness there where he seems to have really wanted Long to be part of the team, but we don't actually. It's not necessarily the recent track record of the last 2 years doesn't necessarily point to Aaron Long being like the cornerstone of the team anymore, even though he clearly is still a quality player. So yeah, it just more evidence or more reason, I think, to think that maybe the course is run, and maybe if he signs with the Galaxy, that will be fine.
Yeah.
Maybe it'll work out for him as well. He just had a kid. Maybe he can move back closer to home. The other big thing is that we did not exercise our option on Elias Manuel, but they did say that we are negotiating. There have been reports that we're negotiating. Is that right?
Yeah, it's been back and forth, but it's been confirmed that we're trying to renegotiate permanent transfer with Gremio. The most substantial report that came out last week was that we were offering to pay all of it up front in cash, but just for a smaller fee, and that Gremio kind of balked at that. And then, yeah, based on some of the other striker news that's come out since then, maybe we've moved on from that, maybe not, but we'll see.
I'm surprised they turned down cash.
Up front too. Maybe they have like some weird accounting amortization they need to do.
Yeah, well, I mean, apparently the option on the loan deal was that it would be like a structured payment,
Yeah.
where we were trying to negotiate a smaller fee by putting it all up front, and they still don't want to do that.
Right.
So-
Everyone knows when you win the lottery, you take the
Amortized.
well, you take the
Annualized.
No, you don't take the annualized. You take the lump sum.
Oh, so I've heard. Yeah, I guess I.
Yeah.
Maybe they wanted it in crypto though.
So true.
Yeah. So it seems like you saying that the Burke rumors maybe mean that they might be exclusive of one another.
It could be. It's hard to tell, but yeah, maybe Burke popping up now is the move that they're going for now that Manuel is seeming to fade away.
I like the idea of Corey Burke. I think we just need a Jamaican on the team.
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't know if you've ever like watched interviews with Corey Burke, but he has like the thickest patois you've ever heard in your life.
Amazing.
Like it's like you can barely. It doesn't sound like English, but he's also we know Corey Burke well. If you've watched the Eastern Conference the last few years, decent, big, aggressive target striker. As I put, on Twitter and in my column for OAM, basically like, a better Tom Barlow essentially, does basically all the things Tom Barlow does, on a higher level. And, I think that's an interesting signing to make. He's also 30. So obviously a little bit, of an older signing than the club's accustomed to. And there's been a little bit of buzz that, that will, based on Schneider's comments, and obviously Struber's comments, that the team might be going a little older in recruitment this offseason. And it sounds, I mean, Burke has followed the team on Instagram and stuff and is faving posts like, Flames, RBNY and shit like that. So
does that mean
sounds pretty close.
We're finally getting Jürgen Heil?
We'll see. We're gonna get Unizovic out of retirement.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, it's hard to say. Like, I mean, so early on if we're just gonna add Corey Burke to like the striker core, or if we're gonna move someone else out? I mean, I think the longest time there's been sort of a received or assumed wisdom across all sorts of different camps that Tom Barlow to St. Louis might eventually make sense. And Bradley Carnell has, in fact, seemed eager to pick up former RBNY linked guys. I mean, he got Jared Stroud from Austin, and then he picked Jake LaCava from us, as we'll talk about in a moment. Seems to not be shy about that Rolodex. But that has not happened yet, or there's not really been any reporting about that yet. And many of our assumptions about Tom Barlow have, not been right. I mean, like, there's no reason to think Garrett Struber doesn't just like Tom Barlow straight up. I don't know. So it's hard for me to imagine what the striker core could look like. And I think, to a point, we said it, more than once, but a couple weeks ago, I think Sam, you're saying it's just like so hard to imagine what kind of striker would even work, or like what kind of striker he even wants for the system.
Yeah, I mean,
exactly.
the other thing about Berg, I mean, there's the Barlow comparison, but then there's also that I think Burke is pretty similar player to Fabio in that respects. And, we love Fabio. It was a fun time and everything, but he did not set the world on fire scoring goals here.
How good is Burke in the air? I can't remember.
Well, yeah, I mean, hopefully, I mean, I was going to say Ashley Fletcher again as another guy who is just sort of the hard running target forward who's supposed to be what works in this system, and it just didn't happen.
I have to say, we have to stop with the misconception that tall guys are good in the air and their heads, as a tall man with a poor header himself, we have to stop generalizing and essentializing our height.
But it is, I mean, even among our guys that aren't that tall, it is a little weird how poor in the air we are, especially considering the way that we play. I think it would really benefit us to have at least one striker or midfielder who can bring a ball down in the air, win a header, like a Route 1 header. And that's something we've really struggled with the last 2 years. Our only threat on corners or scoring or set pieces is mostly Reyes, right? Long.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's like interesting that doesn't seem to be part of the scouting profile that we have when we're looking at guys.
Well, I mean, that's what I'm kind of saying though, is that unless Burke proves to be, Burke's like pressing and defensive metrics are off the charts, so that's a fit there. But yeah, unless he proves to be a guy who can make the ball stick, make long balls stick in the final third, he'll just be even if he does make long balls stick in the final third, because we've as we've seen over the last couple of years, Klimala has no problem, at least on the ground, chasing down those long balls and getting into those areas, and then the rest of the team doesn't show up. It's still not amounting to anything. And even if Burke does prove to be as good in the air or better in the air than Fabio and Fletcher and even Barlow,
someone needs to run that ball.
We still haven't. We've seen glimpses of that over the last couple of years, and it still hasn't worked. So
yeah. Before we go into more striker talk, there are, I think, two other players of note, which is one CCJ, who has a year on his contract left. Did we
we activated an option.
Okay, we activated an option, so he is for another year, which is good to know. Had a $5 million bid from Lokomotiv Moscow, administratively rejected, right? So it was like MLS who...
New York was interested, but MLS turned it down.
Because of sanctions?
It's not official, but you would have to read between the lines and think that, you're not allowed to do business with Russian clubs right now.
Illegal? Yeah.
Even if it wasn't, like a, just like kind of like woke thing. It
might be literally illegal.
Like it's literally like, so much red tape.
Committing international crimes.
Right.
I mean, like Abramovich had to sell fucking Chelsea. Right? So like, I assume, like it might just be impossible. So maybe Lokomotiv is actually just doing it as like a prank or something. They knew they wouldn't be able to get him, which is a shame though, because that would have been a great
deal.
Great offer, great deal.
Well, what was it? Ralph was working at Lokomotiv
before the war,
before the thing, and then so maybe this is some kind of long con to raise CCJ's value for a real transfer.
Well, maybe.
Maybe we're actually doing some business.
It's interesting that he got a bid, and that we seem, according to the report, it was like Bogart, right? That we seem interested, because news has been far and few between. There's
a bid from Brighton, or maybe not a full bid, but the interest from Brighton in the summer too. So we'll see what happens.
And then Kyle Duncan, it sounds like questions up in the air about whether he could still return yet again.
Yeah, supposedly he could come back, even though it was reported that the plan was for him to go back to Belgium, but we'll see. I don't think any of the voices here will be too
Yeah, more broadly,
plussed about whether he comes back or not, but we'll see.
even beyond just my skepticism of Duncan, it kind of doesn't fill me with confidence that we seem to have few ideas about the right back position when it seems to be such an important position for us. We have the ability to go and find a right back out there. Like there's the scouting world is large and there's a lot of guys that could fit our budget that even if it like doesn't work out, the fact that we don't seem to have like a more precise idea of like who we would want doesn't seem great. Doesn't seem promising to me.
Well, I guess we can segue from that into the fact that it was literally the first part of his introductory statement. He put it in like big jazz hands or whatnot. Jochen Schneider saying that the club has hired a full-time chief scout again.
Ooh.
Sebastian Hausel, who has been in the back room at Salzburg. Pretty young guy. I mean, I guess it was kind of predictable that if we hired a scout under Schneider, it was going to be some Red Bull guy. And yeah, I mean, how much of that we'll see in action already this winter, hard to say. But we haven't had an official full-time scout since Paul Fernie left kind of in the early Thelwell years. And there was kind of a premise under Thelwell that for first team, at least, most of the scouting was going to be his kind of Rolodex and network. And that was what we were kind of seeing on top of also the kind of synergy signings from Salzburg and Brazil. And now that we are going to bring in a full-time scout, I don't know how much that changes our recruitment, but you would hope it makes it, pretty prolific this winter because it seems like the squad needs to be a little bit rebuilt again. And even though, I guess going into more of Schneider's press conference, he said that he thought that this last season was pretty good and they want to keep the current group together. And we'll see how well that can be accomplished.
Maybe this is apocryphal, but wasn't the story also on Lewis Morgan's recruitment that the analytics guys were just sort of running the numbers for advanced things that they liked?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that he popped up at the top of all their charts, so they decided to make a run at him.
Interesting. I mean, that paid off.
I mean, that seemed. I mean, I think Amaya was a similar thing when we made that trade, and I think that's a good route to take for MLS deals. But now it sounds like we're going to have a guy who's going to be globetrotting, trying to find.
Right. So I guess
difference makers.
And those were both Thelwell era. So I guess it was like a combination of, Rolodex and also having the analytics guys dig through.
Corey Burke is not of this kind of...
Oh, I think Corey Burke is probably way at the top of charts. Right. Yeah, for the type of things that we look at.
So it might be encouraging that we still have these kinds of signings.
Yeah. I mean, we do. I feel like we've been consistently hiring up those data analysts, right? Like research analysts. So that seems to at least be a sign of stability there, which I don't mind. So there's the press conference that Schneider did. There's also the expansion draft that happened, where I don't know how much we want to read into the protected list, but I guess Tom Barlow was protected. Patrick Klimala was not, although maybe it's the kind of thing where his salary is so big that he's like a more expensive player that
teams can't afford to pick him.
I think there's also an aspect where it's like guys who get brought in for a fee like that and like on their national team radars and come to MLS, like don't take it as well when they get yanked around the league by American sports mechanisms. So,
but also I feel like if we are talking to them about Tom Barlow, there might be a little gentleman's agreement there.
Yeah. They did suggest Jake LaCava, who did he have any first team minutes last year?
No. Well, he was playing in Tampa all year.
Right.
He's never officially been a first team player. Has never had a first team contract, but has just been kind of a standout at RB2 level. He came in from the Barca Arizona Academy at the same time as Caden Clark, even though he's a year or two older, but still, was pretty solid for Red Bulls too, and then was pretty solid for Tampa in USL this year on loan. And it seemed like he, was pretty primed to get a first team look this off season. The idea of when he got taken in the expansion draft that he was like the future of the club is a bit overwrought, but was probably going to be in the mix for probably competing with probably like an Omir Fernandez for that kind of depth forward role probably. But yeah, I guess it's definitely odd and I guess counterintuitive for a lot of people that they would protect Barlow instead of a player like LaCava, but then, you're always going to be sort of, put in a bad situation by these expansion drafts. Sometimes that's what they're designed to do. They're designed for an expansion team to be able to take a valuable player that, a team wouldn't give up otherwise. So that's just something that happens sometimes.
Yeah. And
they moved him on to Miami also.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. He was an asset. Sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, okay.
So,
I forgot that. I didn't know that. LaCava, I'm trying to remember if that was the guy that when Eric came on, I think it was Raffanello that he was really selling us on like, being potentially good, and then he got sold. But I mean, look, also maybe it's worth remembering that this year we've played a 16-year-old. We've got several players in the squad who have been playing consistently, but are like low key only 20 years old or even younger. Still, John Tolkien broke into the squad real young. Caden Clark. Weird season, but also real young. Drew Yearwood, extremely young.
Wiki
Carmona.
Carmona. Sergeant
Goma
is
the 16-year-old as mentioned.
And it's just like if all these guys are in the line ahead of LaCava, I don't think he was really destined for great heights.
The last couple of years we've shown we have no hesitation with just throwing the young guys out there to like fully get the minutes. So it's not like they picked Ngoma or something like that,
And we've also moved on from Omar Sow too, right?
Yeah, he got released.
So
after like, kind of a dud loan in Iceland. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think that stuff makes sense to me in terms of like we're probably just not seeing the stuff we need to see.
Yeah, I mean it's like it's also like to be frank and not to be dismissive. I mean it's bottom of the roster stuff, which is like if you're dorks or if you're really into it like us, it's like. Yeah, it's fun to dig through it, but like it's sort of by definition like it's not what's
making or breaking a season.
Yeah. It's like it's us losing Jake LaCava. Like maybe if you really rated him, I could understand being a bit bittersweet or a bit sad about that. But it that doesn't extend neatly into. This team not having difference makers or whatever.
Well, it's also just, this is just a whole other kind of like third rail, not to get derailed into, but just some of the reaction, both with LaCava and some of the reports about Long leaving, where it's just like, oh, well, we only have 2 center backs now. We only have like 1 forward. It's like, there's 3 months in the off season. They're not the only players on earth. We're allowed to sign replacement players if guys leave. Then they, like you're saying, Brit, it's bottom of the roster stuff. It will be figured out eventually. That's what executives and coaches are there for.
Right. Speaking of which, press conference, getting fully into it.
Yeah.
Jochen Schneider stood up, walked into the mic, and said, "View from 202, drop dead."
Schneider to 202, drop dead.
Yeah, exactly. He said that great, Garrett Struber did a good job, great job. He's got the trust. He sees no reason why he won't be back, or something like that in January.
He said, I have no information that he won't be back in January, which not the most confident way you could phrase that, but we obviously know the situation, and we've seen the Louis Dreyfus steak dinners and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so Struber
I guess that explains some of Schneider's rhetoric there.
Right. So before he was spotted with Louis Dreyfus, who is it's like this big, it's like the European version of the Astors, I guess. And also, like, literally, it's like the same Dreyfuses as like the Dreyfus affair in like you know France in like World War One.
Yeah, they roll deep.
Yeah, and I was like, oh damn, it all
Like
comes
Julia
together.
Louis-Dreyfus.
Also her, yeah. It's all
It's all the same.
kind of assumed
Oh my
it would have
God.
been, you know, some level of coincidence. Also, I feel like with our families like that, like half the Kennedys don't have Kennedy as their name anymore, but they're keeping it tight over there. You know, maybe it's like a regnal title or something. But yeah,
has been spotted hanging out with him, even though supposedly Sunderland is not about to fire their manager. So who knows? Maybe he just has weird rich friends, since he's such a cool guy.
And then he also gave an interview before this too, right?
where it was behind a video, I didn't go out and get a VPN to be able to watch Austrian Sky Sports, but the headline of it is that Struber, he was being interviewed at a random Austrian league match, and he said, if I get a job offer in Europe, that would be ideal.
I mean, like, if he wants it so bad, how hard could it be?
Yeah,
Right.
at this point, he was already there.
It's kind of it's kind of a thing where like it feels like the Premier League and Bundesliga links are sort of dissipating a little bit, and it might be a thing where, and it seemed like he was jockeying for the Austrian national team job too, and it might be kind of a thing where if he is so unhappy here and really desperate to move on with his career, he might have to settle for something like Rapid Vienna or some kind of like, smaller
Second
European or
Bundesliga,
Austrian,
Bundesliga.
Austrian or German gig. We'll see. Because I mean, I don't know. It's something that we've beaten to death on here throughout the year. But I mean, it's just such a bad look to have your manager. And then, of course, Schneider said this in his press conference when Eric Friedlander asked about it. I mean, they're going to say that, oh, this is just how we do it in Europe. This is just how Europeans act and stuff like that. But also, fine. I'll accept that premise. That's how Europeans act. It sucks.
Yeah.
Europeans suck. Like, Europeans are weird. So,
Weird, bad
and
vibes.
you're not working in Europe.
Yeah.
So, cut this shit out if he's going to be sticking around.
It's not, just learn how to
another
make
year.
some fucking ice cubes. It's not that hard.
Yeah.
All right. It is weird. Also, I mean, okay, I assume he has an agent, but as I was thinking that, I realized Struber would be the kind of weirdo to represent himself. But
He's got a pretty hardcore agent.
Okay, if I were his agent, I might strongly be considering being like Gerhard. I know you think like you could get into the Premier League or something, but at this point, maybe it's actually just a better idea to get like a nice, stable second division German team or a team in the Netherlands or something and stick around and just like, maybe we can try to find an owner for you that has a little bit of money, has a little bit of stability, will give you a leash and just like really work it out there. Not like, does he want to end up at fucking Nottingham Forest? Does anyone like that does not seem to be what he needs personally, just selfishly for him right now. Like
another 6 month
Yeah.
yo-yo gig. Yeah.
right.
Well, he's waiting for Jurgen Klopp to hit, I think, the sack for his job.
Oh, he's going to get the Liverpool job.
But
Okay.
I honestly, maybe Gerhard, like if this team that you're currently managing looked better, you might have had more offers coming your way.
Also, like the Sun of all places did manage to pick up the fact that we fucking hate him on Twitter, not 202 Red Bulls fans.
Yeah.
Like are tired of his shit on Twitter. So like, and it's not like the Daily Sun cares about New York sports that much. They found that pretty quickly. So obviously him being an asshole, like, gets noticed. Like the fact that we don't like that he's an asshole gets noticed. So maybe he could work on that. Maybe that also would help. Like if the first thing you Google about Gerhard Struber is in a Sun article or Daily Mail article being like, everyone in New York thinks you suck.
And it's also just kind of like an appendage to a lot of the discourse at the end of the year about how, the team has not really been in the community that much and Struber doesn't have that many, ties with the fans or whatever. But then, and like has barely ever been seen in New York outside of like an airport tarmac.
Yeah.
And yet all the time in the world to be touring around, Europe, hanging out all these places, having, champagne with all these different weird aristocrats and no time to even, it's probably a bad time to have to, go to, Dave and Buster's with the season ticket holders here, but the fact that he won't even go through the motions of it while doing all this other stuff is just not a good look.
There is a Dave and Buster's that opened here, so if they do want to do that, they should do it here.
You should meet us at RPM Racing. Yeah. That way it can.
We should settle. Yeah, we can settle it on the track.
I'll be wearing my RPM Racing balaclava. So, yeah, he won't know it's me.
But yeah, and then I guess that just to kind of Schneider, doubled down in saying that he thought, Schneider's word was that the season was good, not great. I don't know if that was exactly verbatim, but the gist of it was saying, the season was good, not great. And that Struber did a good job and has his faith and all that. And that they're going to try and keep the squad together. So, we'll see how well they're able to do that. And, hopefully bring some new blood in, because supposedly it's impossible to win with the team the way it's constructed right now.
You know what? I will say to that point, like, to an extent, sure, season being good, not great. Sure, fourth place. Like, to some extent, like we've said over the course of the season on this show, that is one of the weird and confusing things about this season. It's not in need of like an entire implosion or rebuild. But I do think the difference between this squad and the reason why this team lost in the first, was the only home team to lose in the first round, is like we're missing that like actual belief among the team and the manager that like we could just will ourselves to victory.
This team has no Riz.
No Riz?
Yeah, that's the new thing right now.
Riz?
Yeah.
R-I-S?
R-I-Z-Z.
R-I-Z-Z.
It's
no
like
Riz.
if you're going to the DMs with no Riz, you're not, Yeah, that's what.
Okay. But yeah, like I think it shows that like one way or another, this team did not expect them to win, as we've ranted about on the last couple episodes, particularly passionately, that the call was coming from the inside of the house. So like, yeah, maybe there's an aspect where like Struber's X's and O's are not actually as bad as I think, or like, maybe I'm just fed up with it somewhat irrationally. But the intangible aspect of leadership and helming a team, I think, is the part that is extremely fucking relevant, especially in a playoff system, but also in a single table system. Like, I think definitely a lot, like we were 1 point behind City. We're 2 points behind City. So one result behind City. And then, there's definitely 10 points on the table we left there from just, not sort of willing ourselves and having that sort of belief in the squad. So yeah, maybe the X's and O's work out on paper in some way, Jochen, but like, I think the leadership aspect is really key. It's really important aspect.
Yeah, and I think it was. I don't think it was a very smart move on Schneider's part to kind of blow off the question about Struber's rhetoric and how it impacts the team. Because it's not, unless Struber is just planning to be all smiles next year and saying we're going to win MLS Cup and everything. I just don't see how that's sustainable as a way of framing the project you're working on.
Yeah. Also, like, it's
just so corrosive on so many levels.
Like, I watch a little bit of European soccer, like I've watched a decent amount over my life. Like they talk about like that a little bit more, but not really. Like, no, I feel like so like Schneider's comment was like, oh, this is just kind of in Europe, it's more normal to just like be candid about like, oh, we're basically a mid team, like, and we've got mid players who we can't afford to beat Manchester City. Some aspect of that, I guess, is true. Like, yeah, the leagues there are more strictly stratified. But like,
that's not what this league is.
It's not what this league is. And also the tone is still meaningfully different. It's not, I think it's like, okay, we're going to try to like really shock people and go, and like, we don't maybe have as many resources, but we can really like, we found some real talent and put it together. It's not like, I don't know why you people expect me to win. Look at my players. They're terrible. Like, that's still not the tone in Europe when they talk about it. So like, maybe is missing. It doesn't work even as an excuse on its own right for me.
And he also had a part where he was just like, oh, Gerhard gets emotional after games or whatever. It's like, all right, well then grow up. Like, I mean, that just is another part of like, that he's a fairly young manager, and, a more experienced manager knows that you can't fly off the handle and whine every time you lose a game.
Or you can whine about the refs. If he wants to be Mourinho, like actually watch some fucking Mourinho game tape, which I mean interviews, and see who he gets mad at. Or like even the way he gets mad at his players. Like there was a Mourinho quote recently out of Roma, where he like was like, oh yeah, the performance from like 15 of the players was great. There's one other guy, and he kind of like, he didn't name him, but he like was like, this one player sucked, but like in doing so he at least boosted his other 15 players on the day, and was like, they showed up and like they are working hard. Gerhard is more just like, I don't know, it's all shit.
The new hot coaching thing to take over from previously successful managers to get a degree in emotional intelligence. Maybe Gerhard should get
Who offers those degrees?
I don't know. Graham Potter apparently has like a PhD in
that's
emotional intelligence.
It's working.
No,
great.
the players like him. That's the big thing.
All right.
He's there for the long haul, according to Fabrizio Romano.
Great. That's the best thing I've heard all day. Anything else from so I guess there's also the Mintzlaff, Oliver Mintzlaff, who was head of Red Bull Sporting, Red Bull Soccer.
Well, he was the last few years he was officially just the CEO of RB Leipzig. Okay. But he's always been kind of the commercial head of Red Bull Soccer,
right?
While Ragnick had been the more technical guy. But since Ragnick left a couple of years ago, Mintzlaff has been more or less the chief guy.
Right. And I believe, I don't know how true this is. I don't know how many like literal owners meetings have happened even in MLS over the last couple of years. But I believe that when there's a time for us to fill in a form or fill a seat, that's like the owner of Red Bull New York, Oliver Mintzlaff is the guy who goes. Dietrich Mateschitz has passed. He died. I think we talked about that in the last episode.
He's doomed.
I think we kind of reiterated the point that Cork made in his column and on the show, I think the week before too, that like, yes, changes are inevitable, but like they're going to take some time. Like, we're not going to, yeah. One change seems to have occurred now, which is that Mintzlaff has received a promotion to being not just Red Bull Sports, but just CEO of Red Bull.
Well, there's going to be a trio of CEOs running Red Bull post Mateschitz, and Mintzlaff is going to be one of them, overseeing kind of general branding and marketing, but big part of that being sports.
Okay.
So,
and then he also made some comments about the salary cap, right, in MLS?
Yeah. So earlier this week, he did an interview with Bild where he said it was just kind of a general check-in on all of Red Bull Soccer and his promotion and all that kind of stuff. But he had a comment where he said that their goal for Red Bull Soccer is that they're not going to buy any new teams, and that they're pretty committed to the teams they have now, and they're going to try and engineer them a little better. And his second part of that was him saying that MLS is particularly hard because you have a salary cap and you can't just throw money at problems like you can do in all their other leagues. And there's a pretty predictable kind of discourse about that, with one end of it being like, Red Bull's so cheap anyway, and all that kind of stuff that has been always in the kind of debate through the years. But then also, I mean, I said this online that I thought the more interesting side of it was him, obviously, everybody was saying, just spend more in MLS. Don't wait for MLS. Well, I guess I should say the other end of that was Mintzlaff saying MLS should open up the rules, and that Red Bull would be willing to spend more in that case. But then I think the other end of it that's more interesting is him kind of conceding that taking Leipzig to the top of Germany or near the top of Germany, taking Salzburg to the top of Austria, even taking Bragantino near the top of Brazil, somewhat easier feats when you have the budget Red Bull has, as opposed to what you can do in America, where Red Bull still won trophies anyway. And I guess,
and we're just hovering around first to third place for 8 years,
right?
Yeah.
And I think this kind of cycles back to what we were saying earlier about my column with Philadelphia, where it's like, it still can be done. in this system with supposedly cheap young players. Why aren't we doing it? That's the more confusing question, and something that we'll, see more answers about in the next year.
Yeah, to me, it seems evident at this point that, Red Bull, to the extent that there's a Red Bull mothership or like HQ, was taking for granted the consistent success we had from 2010 to 2018, and maybe didn't fully understand what actually was driving it. And now maybe they're investigating it. I guess one way of putting our disappointment in the last couple of years is that I wish it had been more clear that there was some sort of investigation, or look like from the Rebel thing being like, hey, what happened here? What was working and what is.
Yeah.
I mean, presumably, Thelwell made it sound like he was sort of charged with that a bit. And now maybe Schneider probably is a bit as well. I don't know how much, digging up and interviewing and talking to people about what worked specifically in 2010 to 2018 there was done. And even if they did do that, of course, you'd have to take it with a grain of salt because things have changed. I think one aspect, though, that was consistent in that era is that we consistently had good facilities, just high level professionalism in the club, and compared to the rest of the league. Now I think it seems like we're more middle of the pack when it comes to that. And that is one area where you can spend a lot of money and kind of brute force it compared to
building
MLS.
out the back room and facilities and just general
building out the personnel.
Yeah.
And we are building a new training facility. We have seemingly hired more sports science analytics people, which is good. They could spend more money on the commercial, or just recruit more heavily for the commercial aspect. I mean, we've voiced our complaints and our displeasure, both, I think, just about the taste and tone of the presentation of the club in the last couple of years, which, maybe that's a matter of taste, but also just sort of the amount of effort that seems to have gone into it also seems sort of minimal compared to what we became accustomed to. Or just sort of really giving an impetus behind the club as its own organization. Those are things you can spend money on. And those are the kind of things that the club did historically spend money on, that I think I've bristled at the implication that, we're just so cheap and lazy because the club did that well. And that's the things the club is not doing well that I would like them to spend more money on, not buying, Chiellini to be old. So who knows? I mean, who knows how this is going to shake out? It's still early in the Jochen Schneider era, but I think there's some things in those quotes that I like. Although I think it's going to take a while for any of that to percolate down to us, probably. But yeah, anything else about press conferences, or because I think the main thing we have left for this episode is superlatives for the year. We didn't do it last episode because it was right in the wake of the thing. And then the World Cup is tomorrow. We can touch on that briefly. Are we ready to do superlatives?
Let's do it.
Sure.
The team did a little thing of their awards this week. We're going to do our own version. I think we're going to keep it kind of simple. If you are so inclined, if you want to, really laugh, you can look at our prediction episodes, our preseason episode this year, I think, where we had a full kind of list of more detailed prop bets and stuff, and who's going to score the most goals. This is not the episode we're going to revisit that or look at that in detail. We're just going to do simple player of the year. We're going to do newcomer of the year, and then we're going to do favorite game and your favorite goal, if you can remember one. So, player of the year. Let's make the rounds. I anticipate there's going to be some overlap, so runner-ups or honorable mentions are welcomed. Peaches, we can go clockwise.
Okay, it's hard to argue against Lewis Morgan, I think, is my first choice. I feel like it might be pretty close to that across the board. But aside from him, I'd honestly give my other player of the year award to John Tolkien, I guess.
Really?
He's just been there. Reliable, nothing wrong. He's kind of the perfect fullback player you want a little bit. Well, not perfect, but he's
he's reliable.
Yeah, he's a reliable fullback. That's kind of an archetype for me.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the whole season, right? There's, I don't know, there's not any other player that I think stands out as being kind of on top or involved in big, opportunities and things in the way that Morgan was. And I think the only other person that had been kind of consistent from start to finish, I guess, other than Cornell, who was fine, was Token. So I say the same thing.
Yeah, I was going to actually say Coronel before Tolkien as far as my kind of secondary answer, because, yeah, it's kind of by acclamation that Morgan was the player of the year. But, every time I go and try and, do a pissing match about goalkeepers or whatnot, it's amazing to me that Coronel is not, near the top of whatever kind of metrics and stuff there are, because he's, just incredible week after week. I mean, literally, one of, if not the top goalkeepers in the league. And I've, said over the last couple of years since he came here that he has a real shot to potentially be a Brazil international keeper if he gets a good move or two somewhere down the lines. I mean, he's top class for this level. I mean, I think, cherish him being in goal while you can.
I don't think I ever remember him making like a clear-cut mistake.
The only thing this year was that one thing with Edwards where they collided and let the guy come through. And I think it was in Minnesota,
like in the midfield.
Columbus.
Yeah, it was like Columbus and Philly. It was like
that's true. Okay, yeah, that's yeah.
But like other than that, yeah,
I do remember at the time thinking that was
so
that felt like the first
uncharacteristic.
time.
Yeah,
I was like, oh, dude, you fucked. Wow, you actually made a mistake. Wow. Good shout. I think, I'm going to have to co-sign with the Lewis Morgan by default kind of thing. 6 months into the season, or halfway through the season, I was like so sure Frankie Amaya was going to be this for me.
Yeah.
And it's weird to think about because it's not like he played poorly in the second half. He just kind of disappeared. I guess he was hurt. I've complained about this a couple times on this show, that like the communication on like being rested versus knock versus hurt has been very poor this year, and I think it compounds. It makes it for uneven, frustrating perception of the team. It makes it harder for people like us or even more casual fans to really understand who's on the squad and what we're doing, which I think is not something to overlook. Really, I think like it's not just us being pedantic. Like I think it matters. But yeah, he kind of just like disappeared for a bit, and. When he came back eventually, though, he still played well. And I think a lot of the best that we played this year was when Frankie was on top of his game. And I think it was also just so encouraging to see him return to form after sort of mysterious disappearance from the squad last year. Because, he got those couple games when we got him from Cincinnati last year. He slotted in directly. It was apparent that he was just figuring it out on the go because he was brand new, but he looked decent. And then he was banished, for fitness, I guess. And then to see him come back this year, play further back on the pitch, and really do a good job, like commanding the field first with Drew Yearwood a lot of the times, I think was really encouraging. And then I would like to build on that next year, one way or the other. And I would at least like to know if he's not on the team, if it's because he's knocked or injured or unfit, or if he's actually just not been selected. That's a personal wish list of mine. I'm ad hocing another category, an optional category. I feel like that's a annual tradition, is that if you have a most confusing guy of the year, feel free to
I was going to say most interrupted season.
I feel like we've got several.
I was going to say that's a lot of
competitors.
contenders. That's the most competitive category.
We can do confusing guy is optional if you want to pipe in at any moment, but newcomer of the year is the next one. We can go the opposite direction. Cork, if you want to start, if you have a newcomer.
So I mean, I guess I'll just throw out my candidates for confusing player, because I mean, go down the list. I mean, Klimala, Dylan Nealis, Drew Yearwood. I mean, Luquinhas. Eventually by the end of the year, even. It's a category where it's kind of almost more helpful to go in which players are you most clear about is more to the point. But anyway, going to newcomer of the year, if we're defining that as I think the club kind of did when they gave it to Edelman as the player who, like the young player who was coming into the team for the first time, I think he's a pretty good shout, pretty clear shout. If you want to do a more expansive take on that and just, whichever guy who was a new signing who did the best, I mean, Edelman obviously was a more, consistent part of the team in the second half of the year, but I mean, shit, it's easy to forget now. And again, I just mentioned it, but man, at the middle of the season, it looked like Luquinhas was going to be like the best player in the league, literally. And it ended up kind of plateauing after that. And I guess, that's a way to kind of dovetail both my newcomer of the year and my most confusing player of the year into one, is that, and not to, again, beat one of our, kind of hobby horses on here again, but it seemed the longer that he became integrated into Struber's, intricate football system, he became worse at playing soccer. So we'll see if he can have a rebound next year.
Yeah, the non-Lewis Morgan newcomer of the year, I guess award would go to Edelman. I think there's so many on the confusing side of things. I think it's good to answer both just in one breath here. There's a lot of players that had confusing seasons, I think, by no fault of their own. So, and there's, I think a bunch, maybe some fault of their own, but a lot of it, I think, came from, decisions to just, to the 11, tweaking managers' decisions, things like that. And that could be anybody from, Klimala to Dylan Nealis, who just played like maybe 6 or 7 different positions on the field at a different point in time throughout the whole season. Yearwood and Amaya, I think any of them just had confusing seasons. I think not really because of their own doing, and maybe even CCJ to that mix, just because of like how weird his season was too.
He's just a weird player.
He's just the most confusing career.
Yeah, but I think confusing from a like performance standpoint, it has to be Luquinhas because as you said, he was red hot, and then he just wasn't able to create in the same way, just like totally muted, on that right side of the field when he was playing up with Morgan and Klimala. So I'd have to give it to him as well.
Yeah, I mean, again, like technically, I would say it's probably Lewis Morgan. Kyle Duncan. That's a new name. No, but I
technically a newcomer.
Yeah, exactly.
Kyle Duncan is he's no longer confusing to me because of how confusing he is. I'm like,
now I expect to be confused,
Right.
so it's fine.
Okay, so I'll get to that too. But I think like I'll agree with you that I just like Daniel Edelman not only as kind of that he stepped in, but like I feel like there is a longevity in terms of him playing with us, I guess, for a little bit at least. Maybe kind of like a midfield version of Tolkien in that kind of way, where you can be a more reliable kind of week in week out player, as he was starting to be by the end of the season. But like my short list for confusing character, like you guys said all the things, but like my short list is Caden Clark and Kyle Duncan for most confusing players.
I forgot Clark, yeah.
And like Clark is just like when he was there, he looked pretty good in my eyes, and he did like everything I thought he was supposed to do.
He scored a goal near the end of the year.
Like, but he also just didn't play, or like he didn't seem like an option a lot of the time, so that was very confusing. But ultimately I have to, like, just because of the way the season ended, like for me somehow it's still Kyle Duncan, where it's like, oh, we got him back, he's played for most of the season, he's not going to start in like our most important game, despite the fact that he's been starting before that, and it's like not his fault that that's happening, but also like very confusing to me and very frustrating to deal with.
The thing about Clark that and this is something that I feel like is just fully empirical, that we already know that Clark can score goals and create action in MLS when he was even younger than he is now. There was the appendix thing, and obviously that ruined his year last year, but then supposedly, recovered from that now, still getting youth national team call-ups, all that kind of stuff. The only way that Clark could have had the season he had this year, when the team as a whole was struggling to attack as much, when he was a year older and stuff like that. And this is kind of going back to my point about LaCava, where it's just like not every player constantly gets better. Not every piece of youth hype always continues their trajectory and always becomes the player you dream them to be. But for what happened with Clark this year and his place in the rotation and the depth chart could only be premised on the idea that you think he got worse than he was
Before,
in 2020, 2021, which I just have such a hard time believing unless you are claiming that his appendix thing was the most debilitating appendix removal in history.
Also, like we just needed
An X factor.
we needed that factor so badly. It's
At
odd
points
that
of the
we
year.
didn't even see it.
Especially off the bench.
Tried.
At least put him on in the 60th minute or something.
Clark's also an interesting canary because, I mean, I guess it's no mystery that Leipzig had a lot of turmoil up at the top, but it also is a canary that, like, maybe, no one's really home on keeping tabs on him.
Right.
And because, you'd think that they'd have an interest in keep tabs on their lone army, but guess it wasn't to be for him. I'm realizing now that newcomer of the year actually had slimmer pickings than I realize. It's basically, Morgan or
Luquinhas or Edelman.
Luquinhas or Edelman, yeah. And it's like hard to go against Edelman, which was also the team's choice. Also because we already just gave it to Luquinhas. But also you guys are forgetting Tyler Pache, who was my choice.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
So
so true.
the legend.
Yeah, exactly.
The most influential because his energy really came with the
That's
rest
true.
of the team.
The I almost introduced the most confusing guy of the year, whereas the CCJ Memorial most confusing guy of the year, because I think he gets in there. And I'm gonna give a shout out though to Andres Reyes, not over the whole. This is just an honorable mention, but only for the very end of the season, where he suffered a kind of precipitous fall in form. I have to say, like the last couple games of the year, I feel like he got asked to play a little bit more wide. I mean, then of course later on he played fucking right back, right? And seemed to really struggle with it after looking pretty decent, maybe not as good as he did in 2021.
And there was the factor of him being eased into the rotation again after his injury, which is a thing that you need to do. But then by the end of the year, there were definitely some games where it seemed like he just wasn't selected, and it's just like, what's the thinking going on here? What's the planning here?
Right.
That's
a canary for me too, because that's something that just should not happen at that time of the season. You should be growing in to this. You should not be adding too many new things. You should be growing confidence in your players, ideally. So that's troubling. It's also thinking back to the long conversation, like Red Bull New York, even in the bad times, has been so good at cultivating center backs. Even during, the zone and Arm and Schruber, we've seen the rise of Sean Nealis. And I think our system kind of just mandates that we develop good center backs, which makes me somewhat more confident about letting Long move on to the next stage of his career. So that also compounds my confusion or worry at this sort of fallen form or confusion, visible confusion, Andres Reyes. All right, so favorite game of the year and goal of the year. We can, I think, maybe lump these together if you've got any. Sam, you can start this time.
Goal of the year is it's that I don't know if I have a specific one. I think it's the one that's like off the volley, like the banger from Morgan outside the box. It just kind of crosses over the
Toronto
goal.
I
think so.
Yeah.
It was just sick. And I don't know. It's nice to it was at home, right? It was like one of those just surprising
one of the rare home games.
Yeah,
that we
exactly.
Had a good time.
So and maybe even going as far as that game. I mean, I had a lot of fun watching the Austin game where we just we threw down a bunch of goals and Austin was pretty hot at that point, and we ended up getting a 4-3 win in Austin. I think best performance though. I thought watching the away game at Orlando was the point where I was like, okay, we actually, despite some weird home performances and some a flat start at home, I think there's some quality here and we can actually be a pretty good team. Unfortunately, all of that came crashing down. I would say that's my game.
Yeah, that was going to be one of mine because I'm genuinely actually unsure if I'm confusing it with that Orlando game from last year, but I feel like that's the last game where we had fun online after a win, right? That's is that the game where an Orlando fan had that post that we were kind of making into a pasta about the rude New York Red Bulls or something?
Could be.
That might have been last year.
It was the big Ashley Fletcher's one moment in the sun where he did the scoreboard 2-0 to the crowd when he was coming off injured.
that was like the last time we had any sort of bravado this year.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm just jumping in the queue and going and saying that was going to be one of my games. And I had to look through the schedule again to jog my memory, because this year was such a blah. And 2 days or just a little bit before that was also the 1-0 game in New England where Ashley Fletcher forced the own goal. And that was a very ugly game. Probably it deserved to be 0-0. But that was also a game that was funny to remember because that was a game where it was like, all right, it's on. Like, we're getting in.
We have the spirits behind us.
Right.
Like, yeah.
And it was like at that point we had dropped the points at home to Columbus and Minnesota, but it was like, all right, that's kind of troubling, but maybe we can sort it. But then when that happened, it was like, all right, we've got the gumption. I think that's kind of the hallmark for me. My goal of the year, I'm going to go for something slightly different, partially because it's hard for me to remember all the goals, especially when so many of the Lewis Morgan goals kind of feel the same. One goal I really enjoyed was Daniel Edelman's goal against Miami. That was a game I was able to go to in person after a long time of not going to games in person. And it was also particularly fun because sitting up in 202 when they scored in front of the South Ward, you could see it very clearly that the ball was like bouncing on the half or second or third volley. And you could see Edelman see it and charge through, and the defender had no idea he was there and just chest it and calmly like slotted away. And everyone in the stadium except that defender knew it was going to happen. It was just really fun to break through. I can't remember if it was the second or third goal that iced the game. But it was definitely the second it was 1-1 before. So it was a meaningful goal. And that felt very cathartic and is one of the few things I'll remember, I think.
I mean, I was going to say originally, like one of the goals from that game, the Luquinhas goal before the Morgan goal, that was that. But I have to go, the Morgan goal was better, I guess. So I'm still going to go with that goal. My favorite game, in context of the season, I remember not enjoying it that much, but that Serge Goma last second goal. Atlanta, yeah. That was probably now, and like looking back as a game itself, is probably my favorite game of the season.
That might have been the last like fun online result.
That's true.
That Atlanta one, because that was right before the Open Cup exit and things really bottoming out. But then my goal of the year that I'll be a little pretentious about and do a little bit of a like sidebar one is the goal that Lewis Morgan scored in Montreal, where his finish was just kind of chipping it over the keeper, but he was fed in by a great through ball by Cáceres that came at the end of a little bit of kind of tiki-taka buildup in the midfield that was just such a sight for sore eyes, especially at that point in the season when the offense had really started to sputter. And just proof that, and this goes into, I mean, Matt Doyle actually had a pretty interesting column about it after we got eliminated that was, speaking to what I, think about that goal now, is just like the players are capable. I mean, the players can play soccer. That just was not in the plans through too much of the year. And, maybe if we add some more pieces, maybe Struber gets a little more confident to let the guys play a little bit more that way. And I guess that sort of segues into, I liked the Austin game too. As far as kind of along those same themes of it was one of the rare games. This was kind of my theme that I wrote for OAM throughout the year too, where we looked so much better in games where we weren't trying to be perfect. And I think that spoke to what the road record was. I think that spoke to some of our surprise kind of like little upsets, little snatch and grabs that we had at moments through the year. And that Austin game in particular, I mean, it was a game where we were rotating before that Open Cup where we tried to be perfect against Orlando and got beat 5-1. And before that, we had a game where we just threw out a rotation team and just sort of let them play. And sure enough, you saw Klimala and Clark and Yearwood and all these, and Goma, all these guys just sort of connect and play fluidly and, enjoy themselves. And we got 4 goals out of it. I mean, obviously the second half was kind of a collapse, but I think that's more of a thing where you're playing against a good team and they're building and they're trying to claw back into the game. I don't think that was proof that the system sucked. I think just, that's something that happens when you go up 4-0 with a team that hasn't played together that much. Maybe if we had played that system a little more, could have had a little bit more lively of an end to the season. And then I guess my other favorite game was the Barcelona game, if only because it was one of the few moments of just kind of like feeling like you were alive at RBA this season, was when there was just like a new pitch invader every 5 minutes at the end. It was just a nice little breakup of the sterility that's set in Harrison over the last few years.
I think the Austin game is a really good way to sum it up, and a very, very good time or slice of this season. If you had to ask someone what the season was like. So we've got to head out to our soccer league soon, but we can briefly just mention the World Cup since it's starting tomorrow. The U.S., of course, is in a group with England, Wales, and Iran. Our first game's on Monday against Wales. Over the course of the season, I think we've peppered in our opinions about the national team. I find myself in a frustrating position where I am, all things being equal, I'm kind of trying to root for 3 teams. I mean, like I like both England and Wales. I Lord knows I've been tired of like USMNT culture for a while, but as we've discussed, I feel like cornered into a hole where I don't want to validate the insane people by us going out in the group. And I think would prefer Berhalter to get a decent result. So I would prefer us to get out of the group. I don't know at whose expense I want it to be though. And for that matter, I don't, even the, I mean, Iran's kind of more tricky. I wouldn't mind. Iran is perennially one of my favorite, like mid-tier teams to sort of keep eyes on in the World Cup. They had a really interesting World Cup last time. Like they had that like at the death game that went into stoppage time. I can't remember the specifics where like, they were like, got so close to scoring a goal that would have put them in over like Spain or Portugal or something. That they're consistently a fun team to watch and kind of usually play solidly together.
Kairos as manager, so somebody who knows what he's doing. Yeah. So
maybe this means our group games will be fun to watch. Although I kind of wouldn't mind if any combination of the teams went through. Yeah. Which makes it hard for me to root.
It's really weird. Yeah.
That's why I'm a Group H guy.
My own personality is that it feels like it's going to be more of a lose-lose than a win-win. Whoever doesn't make it out of the group. So,
who's in Group H?
Korea, Ghana, Portugal, and Uruguay. So
that's a good group.
That is a good group. Yeah. So I'm rooting for good Korea to pull through. Red Devils, let's go.
Well, yeah, and I'm obviously a plastic Welshman, so exactly. I mean, whatever combination gets out of our group, I hope Wales is in it. So.
Are there going to be fans taunting you with a series of Bas?
Is that a thing?
I don't know. They're Welsh.
I want to get one of the bucket hats, but they're literally sold out. Those like red and yellow, like signature Wales bucket hats, but they're hard to come by.
I hope did Alphonso Davies, is he out of the World Cup?
Yeah.
That sucks.
Ooh. Oh, that's right. Canada's in it for first time in a while.
Right. I don't know what to think of Canada. I think, sorry to be like, painfully middle of the road. It will be interesting to see Canada in a tournament. I was like 6 the last time it happened, so I was not watching soccer at the time.
Not alive. None of us were alive.
Oh, did they not? I thought they made 98.
They made 86.
Okay, I don't know why I thought they made 98. But yeah, and then something about it, just also it being Qatar and all of that, feels very emblematic of our times, where it's just like, it kind of all sucks. There's an overwhelming feeling that there's nothing you can do about it. There's no way to like meaningfully boycott or protest or anything like that. But it also just feels like an inevitability where the top tier of capital and money that flows around in the clouds above us is disconnected from any sort of reality on the ground. Yep. So in that way, it's perfect.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, it is the zeitgeist.
But I did see a Johnny Harris video on like all the way that Qatar got it.
I feel like,
and then I remember the two things I just remember is like, oh yeah, Jack Warner and Chuck Blazer. Those are names, you know.
Chuck Blazer, friend of the show.
Chuck Blazer with his
wonder how his
apartment
cats
for his
are
cats.
doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It might be dead by now, actually. That was a while ago.
Manhattan legend.
Yeah. Group D, strong contender for most cursed group. Australia, France, Tunisia, Denmark.
Ouch.
That one. See, like, why can't we trade one of the teams in
Yeah.
our group for that group? Like, that would be
Beat him down.
better. Morocco, Croatia, Belgium, Canada is also pretty weird.
I hope Belgium sucks this year.
Yeah, they've run their
They've
course.
gotten annoying.
Morocco changed their head coach, so I think they're not likable. I don't remember what's happening.
I think it might have been Morocco and Iran that had that like really intense game at the end of the group stage.
Do we want to have a prediction for your ultimate winner?
Maybe. I also say, like, I was pretty cynical going into the last World Cup, but it was kind of a banger.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I'm prepared to be proved wrong. Yeah. Do you have a prediction for either your teams of interest and then the ultimate winners or teams that do well?
I guess I'll say U.S. will make round of 16, hopefully, and then probably bow out there. I think the way the bracket's set up is that we'll probably play Netherlands in that round, which will be tough. But then Netherlands looks the most anonymous that they have in decades. But but then I think as far as total winner, I'll just, not scientific or anything, but I'll just go ahead and say Brazil. It feels like they're due. It feels like they have pretty stacked team for the first time in a while. I just trollishly would like to see Messi have another sad exit again.
Yeah.
I don't know. I've never gotten up for the World Cup like in the past anyway. I mean it's fun to watch, absolutely, but for like the U.S. national team, never really had a preference.
Time zones are annoying too.
Yeah, so I think for me, Brazil is a team that will be really fun to watch. I think just even looking at the selection and just like the kind of never-ending list of attackers that they have, I just think it'll be really fun to see like
And
what
then
they
like
do.
Dani Alves and Thiago Silva.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's so weird too. Yeah,
Right.
they have some Pearson elements to this Brazil team also.
yeah. So let's see what happens.
Is Bolsonaro going to send one of his sons? Because he's still technically president right now.
Oh yeah,
right?
true. I hope Lula's there.
Yeah.
I guess like it'd be crazy if Korea made it out of the groups, I guess. So that's what I'm looking for. But
They could do it.
yeah,
They could definitely do it.
it's a competitive group. US, I agree. I probably will make the round of 16. Honestly, I want to say football's coming home, lads. It's coming home, boys.
I think this kind of feels like it for the England team. Like this is the moment to find out if
Yeah.
they're going to push through.
Yeah, I think this is the team if it happens to.
Yeah, they have been. They do have kind of like an experienced core now that have gone through a few tournaments. So.
Yeah. My long-standing take / prediction on this US team is that they're going to get either to the round of 16 or maybe one out, maybe the quarters, and then bow out, which is also known as completely ordinary World Cup run.
Yeah,
the vast
for the
majority of
US.
every team in the world does.
Yeah.
And people are going to really struggle to wrap their heads around what to make of that, even though it's the most normal thing in the world.
Yeah, and a perfectly acceptable,
Yeah.
Respectable
result
even.
Yeah.
for a team in our station.
One, maybe 2 rounds. I'm feeling. I think Brazil is a savvy choice, but like England also up the top. And I'm thinking, I like the call that like the sort of Belgium tier of teams, like Belgium probably is going to fall off. Netherlands, I guess it's sort of a cold take that Netherlands is
Bad, no.
Yeah. But yeah, okay. And then I think the only across the board question I have as well is that, is this the year that we get a non-Europe or South America semifinalist, either from Asia or
I was actually just in
Africa?
the back of my head, I was thinking like it would be interesting if Mexico made a run, but then apparently Mexico's really down on their team. But then it's the teams that always feel like, I'm thinking like, Netherlands in 2014 and
Yeah.
like some of the big teams that feel like they have an underwhelming squad going into a tournament
Argentina
always seem to do well.
Argentina
Like,
has never looked like, thinking about those runs where they made the final or the semifinals. It's like, don't remember anything about those games.
yeah.
I think it's gonna be weird to watch the Brazil Qatar like final at the end of it all.
Yeah, is it going to be like 2002?
Yeah. Even more egregious. That'd be funny.
Mexico should get through their group. They've just got to face off Poland. But yeah, I think US gets through. US and England. That's it for us. We've got to head out. bother us on the internet, it'll still exist. It'll still exist. It'll be there.
Come on.
It's Alex!